Now I've got the trick chair.
Yay. Oh, wow. Did it work, Rusty? Oh, he was right.
Unfortunately.
Steve just sent me a note saying he wouldn't be able to join us. He's still tied up. So
Okay, perfect.
Steve
No,
will be.
perfect.
on.
Gotcha. Okay. Good evening and welcome to this July 28th Committee of the Whole meeting of the Village of Lake Bluff Board of Trustees. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee El Shamas.
Present.
Trustee Fisher.
Here.
Trustee Freed.
Here.
Trustee Hatch.
Here.
Thank you very much. And I do understand that Steve will not joining us.
That's correct.
Okay. Next are our non-agenda items and visitors for public comments. The Committee of the Whole allocates 15 minutes during this item for those individuals who would like the opportunity to address the Committee of the Whole on any matter not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the Committee of the Whole is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Do we have anybody here willing to address the committee? And I see nobody raising hands. Do we have anybody online, Drew?
If anyone is participating in this meeting via Zoom, please raise your hand. You'll be ready. Time? None.
And I say we move forward to our general business. The Committee of the Whole will entertain requests from anyone present to modify the order of business to be conducted. And I see no requests coming my way. And we're moving forward with the next item that would be the considerations of minutes from the July 14th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any changes on these minutes? It is voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carries. Next, we have a discussion regarding possible restrictions on vehicles.
So at the last Committee of the Whole, back on the 14th of this month, the Committee of the Whole had a conversation. And I'm going to walk through this presentation pretty quickly here, but was talking about why were we here bringing this forward to you all? And there were complaints that the village, largely the police department, had received about reckless use of e-motorcycles and general concern about folks in the downtown and patrons at restaurants having a lot of youth come by at a fast clip. And there's been a dramatic increase in these e-devices around town, and that's what really brought this to a head. We talked about, Chief Smazinski presented the state regulations around the issue. We talked about how other municipalities were addressing the issue, some going to straight banning, and others looking at different ways to manage it. And then talked about maybe some of the reasons why that was happening, that there was some state regulations that weren't super clear, and that there was, at the time, a very recent article in the Chicago Tribune about how these were being handled and regulated very differently across the Chicagoland area, and how I think I made a comment that that's typically a good sign for the state to step in, but that has not happened yet. And that this group had a conversation about how the village could look to generally elevate safety. Matt went through the complexities of the various classes of e-devices and how they are very similar visually, and that made it very difficult to enforce these regulations. We talked about e-scooters and how the state law was a little clumsy and how it tried to manage that. And how, in general, e-motorcycles were a big no-no, but we saw a lot of youth riding them in town, and we have enforced that very strictly. We put out some communications on that through social media that were well received. And one of those things that we're going to talk about tonight is taking the direction of the last meeting, really focusing on, are there ways to control speed? What are maybe geographic areas where it's okay to ride these devices and where they should be walked and maybe where they shouldn't be ridden at all? And really a strong focus on simplicity, given all the nuances involved. And then there was if you remember the board meeting, there was a few folks that attended the meeting that were saying, let's not overregulate Lake Bluff. Let's try to find a path forward so that kids can still get to school and other locations around town. So Matt and I, working with legal counsel, went back and talked to some other communities, and we looked at what we had on the books already and thought that the village's regulations for bicycles was a great place because it addressed a lot of the operational concerns that were being talked about, having an overall limit or regulation regarding speed and safe use, limiting the number of riders, sets out some equipment standards for safety purposes, lighting and so forth, so they're easier to see at night. Talked about limitations on trick riding, all those things that the board wanted to have in there. So it seemed the easiest just to fold that, these regulations in those existing. Also putting in there the geographic limitation of the CBD. It's in the CBD, we want you walking them on the sidewalks rather than on the roads. There are going to be some exceptions to that to include those, I'll call them classic riders that come up from Evanston or the city on the weekends to come get coffee and so forth. Those always okay on the roads. But that's really it, kind of in a nutshell. And we're here to answer any questions. I know I didn't get a lot of questions from members in advance of the meeting, but certainly here to address if there are any questions. We would really focus on education. One of the comments was made in the last meeting too, was how would we get the information out and what would the education efforts be? And we've already had conversations with the school district about working this into their curriculum and making the most of that. And any opportunity they touch base with the students is to get the word out. And that's happening very soon here in August. So be a great timing perspective if there is comfort with this approach. One of the things that we did talk about a little bit, but not a great deal, was the enforcement element. One of the things, just to make clear, and we put this out in our social media post, was we're using station adjustments. A lot of towns that have a much higher volume of, I'll call them minor offenses, whether it be your grass is too tall or you've done other violations of the local regulations, and it includes juvenile offenses. They have local adjudication hearing officers that hears matters like this. We just have not had the volume to really justify that. We've looked at that from time to time. So in the absence of something like that, we would use a tool that we call station adjustment. And that's when juvenile officers that, again, this is mostly a juvenile issue, we would interface with the juveniles. They would bring them, the juveniles in along with their parents and have a conversation and talk about ways to try to change the behavior. And that's what this boils down to, is trying to get changes in behavior and operating within the law. So, and hopefully we would avoid going to court, but that is an option. If this is, station adjustments are voluntary. We can't make that happen, which could result in citations and or court. So that's it. Did I miss anything, Matt?
That's
the high level.
I love it.
Super quick question.
Absolutely.
And I apologize that I wasn't here for this initial discussion, so this might be a redundant question, but I'm just curious if we are defining the separate classes of e-bike, because is it based on speed?
So the classifications are under state statute. So we're gonna
Yeah.
follow state statute
Yeah.
on this, right?
Yes.
So what we have here are the three classes. So ones and twos being the 13, actually, I think it says no age, but like 13 with the 20-mile-per-hour limit versus the class 3 that goes up to the 28 miles per hour, and that's at 16 plus, right? And the difference being those ones and threes are only pedal assisted. The twos allow pedal plus throttle, okay?
Yeah.
But then those motorcycles are just motorcycles.
Yes.
There's no pedals, right?
Right,
They're-
exactly.
It's just a different version of a motorcycle.
Mhm.
So we're trying to make that clear versus the bicycles, which we want to encourage.
That give you a little extra,
Give you a
oh,
little extra oomph.
that's a different. thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we're still looking at those to be, proper roadway use because they're not allowed on sidewalks by statute. And again, we can't do less than the state says, so we can't, right? So we can allow them as they are by law and not mess with it too much, right? So.
So the reason that the classes don't help me very much is because any scooter has no pedals. So it kind of doesn't matter whether it's throttle assisted, class 2, blah, 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 because any scooter,
Is it
Yeah.
just the act of,
n-
But-
you throttle those.
But scooters are different.
Right.
Right.
So
own category?
they're their own, own
Two category.
category. Right.
So, one thing I'd like to say is that table was great. So it achieved the goal from Suzanne, but was achieved simplicity. And if I read that, this is very simple to understand. So thank you very much for that. One thing I talked to Drew this afternoon, but one thing that, there would be a change is the Metra path, that is a county path. The county path allows for any vehicle, electric vehicles on it. That means including e-bikes, e-motorcycles.
So the motorcycles, we didn't see that section. We saw the e-bikes. The e-bikes were specifically in the section that we found on county. So motorcycles are motorcycles, right? So
So there's no difference. They need to be on the road, not on the bike.
if they can be on the road by registration, equipment, driver's license,
Yeah.
insurance.
On the road,
On
Yeah.
the road, so nothing.
not on the path.
Not on the
Path.
path.
So no motorcycles on the path.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what we're saying with, we're calling trails is
Yes.
in this chart.
I'm trying to make, I wasn't going to call it sidewalk. But yeah, this is McClory. This is the North Shore Trail.
Mm-hmm.
Question. Chief, thank you for putting this together. I think it's important for the safety of the kids, the community, so thank you for doing that. Question about enforcement.
Mhm.
If you engage someone and it's not a juvenile,
Mhm.
will enforcement be different?
So the station adjustment is specifically for juveniles, right? So when it comes to adults with this situation, it could be different in a few regards, right? So let's take the motorcycle, for example. If they don't have a motorcycle license, we can charge them under the Illinois Vehicle Code. If they don't have insurance, they could be driving around without insurance. If they don't have registration, they can be charged without registration. So we can go up into that IVC level if we need to, right? But a big part of this, as this technology is sort of evolving, is a big part of this is education, right? That's why we're out here. That's why we're putting these public messages out and addressing it by ordinance in the hope that we're getting ahead of it, right? That we're saying, hey, this is illegal. Don't do it. If you want it to be legal, here's the steps to get it legal, right? So to answer your question, yes, but the hope is that we're preempting it and solving the problem before it becomes something more.
Thank you, Chief.
Any more questions, Drew and Matt?
The draft ordinance I spent some time with, and there's just a few definitional items that I think we should probably take offline rather than go over them, but sometimes we say other motorized vehicles, and sometimes we just simply say motorized vehicles. It seems like we ought to be able to come up with a name that is something other than what you license at the DMV, MV being motorized vehicles. So motor vehicles. So in the title of the statute, and I won't go through this line by line, but in the title of the statute, we call them non-titled, where is it?
It's on page 3. possibly.
Non-titled vehicles. And that's really what we're talking about, but vehicles, right, that don't have to be titled, are power driven. I don't know, I struggle with the definitions a little bit because it says bicycles and other motorized vehicles, but that implies that bicycle is a motorized vehicle, which it's not. So there's just inconsistencies in the language that I would like to clean up. But I think in general, we're on the right path here. I think the chart would be really super helpful to people when we publicize what we've done here. I think that chart's really good. I think a little bit of description about this central business district might somewhere on that chart. Maybe it's a footnote. I don't know. Don't want to clutter it, but so people actually know, because I don't know that everyone does know what that means. I thought that the sign that we have up there already, we can just stick some letters on it that say, it's the law underneath that now. We can pass it and then can use the same signs, but now they say it's the law. So that's helpful. I just think that before we vote it at a regular meeting, that I'd like to massage the language a little bit more. The other thing that struck me is this ridiculous Illinois law that we have to deal with. So I know
Which one?
well, it's the one that says a town can authorize people to ride scooters under 10 miles an hour,
Mhm.
as long as they do so in compliance with state law, which requires them to be 18 years of age. So our statute or our ordinance by definition has to say, yes, we authorize it for people over 18 years of age. And any reasonable person reading this would say, wait a minute, can my 12-year-old ride the e-scooter if it goes 15 miles an hour? I guess it's just completely nonsensical. So I recognize that we need to have it in this ordinance somewhere. Maybe we could bury it somewhere because it makes no sense at all. And so those are the kinds of things that I think we should just think about. I guess people probably don't read the ordinances word for word, but that I went back to the state law to try to figure out if there was any way we could not say if you're 18 and above, but just be sure to get your 12-year-old one that goes 12 miles an hour, because then they can ride it. It's crazy. So
That's our part of this law. And as we were working on the language of this, even as late as this afternoon, we were discussing that because it seems so convoluted comparatively.
if we could just simply say that we authorize, Lake Bluff authorizes the use of scooters below the 10 mile, that go less than 10 miles an hour as required by state law, or as permitted by state law, or something like that, without, the language is just,
Yeah.
the language is so internally inconsistent with what we say elsewhere that it's really confusing. So I think in general, the chart helps a lot. And don't even know if on the final chart, we need to distinguish between the various classes of e-bikes, because we are saying the same thing with respect to all of them, for example. So we might be able to simplify it even further. The other observations I had were just language questions, like why do we refer to an ADA, a mobility device as a self-propelled device when often those are throttle devices as well. So there's some language in here that doesn't make complete
That was
sense.
that was looked back from like other locations and that was consistent.
Yeah.
And with the way it was defined.
Yeah,
So we had talked about it too.
yeah.
And so I guess that's just what
Elsewhere, self-propelled means something else. But in any event, there's little tweaks that before we look at it, I can,
You call it on the diagram, you call it the personal mobility device.
personal mobility device makes more sense to
Mhm.
me than self-propelled, because first of all, the definition uses self-propelled in, it's circular because it says it's self-propelled is a self-propelled something. So I thought we could do better than that. But I think what we've accomplished here is, I think, a good first step. I will not rule out the possibility that people need to tell the town of Lake Bluff when they have one of these devices and they're putting their 12-year-old on it. We talked about it over the length of time. I know we're taking out a bunch of licensing requirements and for bicycles that went in when we were worried about theft. Apparently, we're not as worried about theft anymore, and that was a very convoluted exhausted. I can see why nobody did an exhaustive opportunity. But I think there's a simpler way to get parents to go online and fill out an e-form that says, yes, we have this motorized vehicle. This is what its model is. This is what its serial number is. Love us. And these are the kids that are authorized to ride it. They wouldn't even need to pay a fee. They wouldn't need to approve or disapprove. They would just be filing the information so that we had it. I'm realizing this ordinance doesn't propose that. I am saying if we don't get this situation under control with these, then I think we ought to look at that. I'm willing to not go there now, but if we continue to have the same kind of concerns being raised about speed, about inappropriate usage of motorcycles essentially, which I appreciate are different things, I think we may need to revisit that registration process that I proposed to you, Drew. I know you always want more to do, so.
Well, I think the inherent friction with it is maintaining a list of juveniles. Right?
Oh, well, yes, I suppose that's true. Well, you can keep a list of their equipment and the family name perhaps, but yeah, if that presents a problem, then the list of and the family to whom it's registered is, or to whom it belongs, would be something we would be able to maintain. The only other thing I wanted to say is one of these slides mentioned impoundment as a possible penalty, presumably not the first time one was caught, perhaps the second time one was caught driving without a license. At what point does that person's actual driver's license get impacted? When does the kid not get to get their license when they're 16?
Well, there could be an impact, right away if we wrote it that way. I mean, that's part of why what we're trying to do is, limit this to learning experiences. Cause I think at some points in time, it's not really, I don't know if everyone fully understands what these are as we've, gone from person to person through the village. Everyone says it's an e-bike and like, well, do you mean motorcycle?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think as we're trying to do this in this environment is trying to get this message out clean and clear and concise and that people understand, oh my gosh, that is in fact this off-road vehicle that I would need a license
That
for and
one.
everything else.
The one that
You're
you're
right,
showing there.
right? And so that it's not necessarily a toy or a bicycle, right? That this is a very different thing.
To be driven on the road, it needs to be
Licensed,
right?
the whole 9 yards, right? Like any other sort of
And you have to have a driver's license to drive it.
motorcycle license. So.
Motorcycle drivers, yeah. So it strikes me that station adjustment makes sense the first time. Impoundment maybe makes sense the next time. And then a ticket that impacts the person's ability to get their license the third time, but
I mean, are you talking about these? Because
These?
yeah, well, you can get pulled over and get an unlicensed ticket. Like, we don't need anything for that because it's already there. And then once you get that first unlicensed ticket, if you get a conviction, your license is already messed up. So like,
so what are we doing with those kids? I appreciate what you're saying. We don't need a rule on that.
No.
There's a state law on
Yeah.
that, right? But what we're saying is we're not giving them a ticket. The first
That's
time.
right. We're not trying to give them the unlicensed ticket.
you could. I
But we
mean, it's
could,
like,
right, and
I
that-
don't think, but we don't have to come up. You always have the choice as an officer, whether or not to write a ticket as an ordinance violation, or if you can write it as a real ticket. Those are discretionary choices that the officers give. We don't need to write it down. We can just give direction to the police department. in my opinion.
That's fine with me. I just want us to understand what we're saying.
Right.
And we can offer a station adjustment, but a family may choose, no, give us a citation. Or we won't go to court.
Yeah, that always happens.
It does, if they don't want to
It
talk to
does.
us and they don't want to put people,
Very happy.
write statements. Oh, yeah.
So that's where it's, where
Interesting, because they can fight it in front of a judge.
and say it wasn't, well, you have your opportunity to present your case, right? So but the impoundment aspect of this, we started some discussions on this as well. And part of that is still for us to do a little more, discussing and exploring to see what the possibilities are. Because we do not have that anywhere else in our code. This would be a specific time where we would be doing that impoundment process potentially. So it would take a little more research.
Lots of downsides and trouble, but
I have a question on that. You say that vehicle, that motorcycle should be like, it should be titled? So does that mean that I can go outside, spend a few grand, buy a vehicle, I'm not forced to title it, and I can write it in down? Is that what you're saying?
No, if I'm understanding your question correctly. So it'd be an off-road vehicle.
Yeah.
It's an off-road vehicle that you would need to go through all those steps defined in statute
Yeah.
to make it street legal.
Okay,
You know, like a title, like a registration, insurance, all those things to make it in compliance to be a roadway vehicle.
but today I can buy one of these without having any compliance and just ride it in the street. That's basically what we're saying.
No.
No.
No,
The opposite.
No.
the opposite.
Opposite.
No, I understand that, but what I'm getting to is from the seller of that vehicle,
Mhm.
I actually don't need to do the same thing I would do with a car. That's basically what I said.
Oh, as a seller, yes, because you're selling it, because as I understand, it's being marketed as an off-road vehicle, which you can go take that to, you know, private property and drive it around as long as you have permission to be on private property.
Okay,
Without.
Makes sense.
titling.
Without the title,
Yeah.
so like another off-road vehicle.
so you can, okay.
Does that make sense? A little
It
more?
does, it
Like an
does.
ATV?
These are available for purchase.
Exactly.
I buy a car without, I mean, you don't have to, all you need is insurance. Like you don't need a license. You don't need to have it titled in your exact name if you're paying for it. So there's lots of ways.
And if you're not moving it on roadways and it's, you know, a tow to a location,
Right.
I mean, that's, you know, but again, it's.
Okay.
the-
Thank you.
Want to make sure you give time for public commentary because if
Yes.
somebody in the.
Yeah, here, I can.
Any comments on the board? Let's invite public comment, if there are public comments on this subject. Please, and please state your address and your name. Thank you.
My name is Susie Dutke. I live in Lake Bluff in Tangley Oaks. And it's a tremendous problem there. I walked in a few minutes late and I apologize if I missed what the rules are other than in the downtown area about walking the bikes on the sidewalk. Are children allowed, whether it's the slower bikes with pedals or the ones without pedals, are they allowed to be riding them in the middle of the street as a car drives? And in an area like Tangley Oaks, are they supposed to be walking them on the sidewalk on our asphalt paths, or can they ride them on there? Because I'd say 80% of the kids who ride their motorized vehicles in Tangley Oaks are in the middle of the street, and sometimes 3 across, often 2 across. I'd say 50% of them now have helmets on, maybe 40% have helmets on, and the others don't. It's a curvy area. Everybody's probably aware of Tangley Oaks. And we have a lot of nature. I mean, an adult could be innocently seeing a deer and quickly look to the side, and around the corner is 3 kids coming at them in motorized vehicles. So are there regulations about driving these motorized vehicles in the middle of the street?
So we have there's a table to say, in this packet, there's a table that says what you can do with it. And basically what we said was e-bicycles. So we had the one with a throttle, without a throttle, class 1, 2, and 3, behave exactly like a bicycle. So on the street, okay, and not on the sidewalk. And if you're in the CBD, that means around us, right around here, you cannot be on the sidewalk and you have to walk it. For e-motorcycles, what you're probably referring to, it's actually exactly like a motorcycle. That's what we're discussing. That means that you follow the rules of the road and you have to be a driver's license and a insurance.
E-motorcycle, yes.
E-motorcycle.
There's a family in my neighborhood whose 7-year-old was riding one of those a couple years ago. I think he outgrew it in the middle of the road, all over the place. I mean, everybody was quietly talking to each other about it. I mean, every type of motorized vehicle, a 4-wheeler where the 5-year-old hitched a neighbor girl a big string, and then one of these small wheelie toys, hitched her behind and put it on fast and went through all the landscapers' leaves. You couldn't even see the little girl behind. It's just, it is rampant without rules. And so kids on motorized, the pedaling bikes or non-pedaling bikes. They can be on the road, but do they have to be to the side like a bike would be?
Following the rules of a road. I mean, this is the reason why we're having these conversations. This conversation is exactly to address what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrorizing. It's a tragedy I fear waiting to happen.
Yep.
My child is grown and my child lives in New Jersey, an area just like this, the Ridgewood, Glen Rock area. Ridgewood is like Lake Forest, Glen Rock is like Lake Bluff. And I was there last weekend and I said, what does your community do about the electric bike problem? And they said, electric bike problem? What are you talking about? And I said, these electric bikes, they said, nobody has them around here. And it's a very affluent community. It's not that they can't afford them. It's just that the parents won't give them to the kids. So it's not generalized that this is status quo necessarily. And I fear it's a terrible tragedy waiting to happen. And then an adult who has to carry this in their heart and their mind for the rest of their life when it really wasn't their fault, So my request is that direct education happens to parents directly through the school system and through the community on, it's like the bike rules of the road. If they're supposed to walk them on the sidewalks and they're going to ride them on the street, they must be near the curb. Now, I talked to a Lake Bluff police officer about this, and he said, and some of the kids will hop the curb on these bikes and not realize the curb doesn't take it the same as a regular bike. And I guess there was a child who was injured doing that. But probably they should be taught you can't hop these bikes onto the curb like you can hop a regular
Thank you.
pedal bike. So my request is that direct education happens on where these bikes can be. And if there's a second offense on the same child, possibly child endangerment comes into this because parents are responsible for their minors and need to do something to protect their lives. And again, my child doesn't live with me anymore. I'm worried for these other kids. So that's my request, that there's direct education about where they can ride them and continuous reinforcement of the rules by our police force.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for addressing it.
You can come on up.
Can you please state your name and your address? Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Hunter and I live on Rockland in Lake Bluff. I was just essentially wondering, when you turn 16, you know how you get a permit? If you do get like your electric motorcycle like registered and like insurance and license plate, can you use it with a permit or no?
Chief says no.
Still do your regular life partner plan.
How long does that take?
That's, there's a class and similar steps to it. And then as we were discussing, you would need to make sure you follow all those state statutes to get it registered properly, with insurance and all those other things. And if it goes through that whole process and if it's approved, then so be it. Otherwise, it's not necessarily.
But then like when you do get it registered and all that, you can't ride it on like paths or anything, can you?
Correct, so then it goes on to a street vehicle.
Yeah.
Street vehicles, like we just can't drive cars on
Yeah.
paths, right? So you lose that off-road component of it. Make sense?
Yep, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hunter.
Good evening, I'm Sid Smith. And actually I have a question, I think, for the attorney or for the chief. When you go back, Drew, when you go back to that thing of a motorcycle, my understanding is most electric motorcycles are actually purchased online. I'm a former motorcycle rider, gas powered. Those are actually purchased at a motorcycle shop. When you bought a motorcycle, no, you would get a title. When you buy an e-motorcycle online, do you receive a title?
I think it's just a declaration.
Can you take that to the Secretary of State's office and get a license?
That's our understanding.
Really?
Got it, I guess, but.
Okay,
So we're trying, that's why we're saying it's.
so if an adult were to buy an electric motorcycle, they would be able to license it?
So there's different classes of e-motorcycles and gas.
Okay.
If you look online, you can see a whole bunch of different things.
So if I bought a, 17,000 watt motorcycle, 61 miles an hour, that would be licensed as what? B motorcycle?
I'll have to look at the plate
Okay.
registration, sorry. But, it's just like the concept is the same thing as like the as vehicles, i.e. passenger vehicles, right? Is technology is coming along to allow for, you know, larger, faster of all these things. It's the same thing as being like a dirt bike, like a, you know, what is it, one of those 250s? Kawasaki. Kawasaki.
That's why we got these guys today.
You see those going along the roadway, right? Because they've got registration. And
experts.
that type for it. Have I seen someone do this yet? No. But if I'm following the same concepts as our other motorcycles, it fits in that line.
So we do have an avenue to license.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Other question was on the e-scooters, the slide said 10-mile-an-hour maximum speed limit. How does that work? Do you ensure that the power of the e-scooter is, that would probably be something like 50 to 70 watts. I mean, it's a very low wattage that would run an e-scooter at 10 miles an hour.
I sorry.
For an e-scooter, a stand-up scooter to have a max speed of 10 miles an hour,
Mhm.
that would be a very, very small motor.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something like 50, 70 watts.
So these will actually tell us on the bottom, like what they're actually rated for and like speed and everything like
Yeah.
that. So the statute by state is saying it can only go up to 10 miles per hour. So that's as the law.
This is
says.
proposed. This is proposed.
No, so the state statute requires
Okay.
this, right? But there's state statute, anything that's 10.1 miles or more per hour built, not that is built to do it, right?
Right.
Manufactured, that's not specified by the state statute. But state
Okay.
statute requires authorization for anything less. So that's what this discussion is. Over it, it does not specify.
Okay. Which brings me to my last thing. My sense in listening to all of this and watching over the past 8 months has been that the state, well, the situation we face, it's a silver spoon situation. These are affluent suburbs that have this issue. You're probably not seeing this in Peoria, Kankakee, Decatur. You might see it in Carbondale, Bloomington, or Champaign because of the colleges. But I think the colleges have already proactively had to. So the suburbs are kind of catching up and trying to figure out where do we sit in this. It's not clear to me that the state has an incentive at the assembly level to figure this out.
But the DLC is, the cat is all of the bag. We know that. And that's why we're sitting here trying to, number one, try to address the situation. Number two, be simple for a task of education, making sense to the people around us, okay? And we're trying to resolve the concern that is kids might not be aware of how dangerous they are to themselves and to people around them. So the point is, no, we're trying to figure it out. For example, if that scooter goes 10.1 miles, there's nothing that says anything about it. We have to take care of that. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Any more comments in the room? Any more comments on the board? Drew? Thank
Yeah,
you.
so what Matt and I will do is we'll work with legal to go back and revisit those definitions to make sure there's consistency and clarity.
I
And if you have
marked
a-
up a couple of them. I can send you my markup.
That'd be great. And if anybody else has any other markups, please send them. And we can have this probably at the next meeting, which will likely not be the first meeting in August, will probably be the second meeting in August, because there'll only be one meeting in August, which is, we're going to cancel the first meeting in August. So there we go. So it'll be
Second
the
meeting
end, it'll
will
be
be
the
first.
fourth Monday of August is when this would be heard. For the first time, it'd be 2 readings to amend the code.
Cool. Thank you. And our next subject is a discussion regarding the village special event program regulation. Drew?
In this item, I wasn't specifically looking for action or direction, although it's always nice. But the goal was to let you all know that staff and the village attorney have been working on special event permit regulations. And I had put through a list of 4, I'll call them decision points for you all to be thinking about. And if there is any direction, that would be great. But really, and one of these is the most substantive, and that's number 3, that deals with the village's definition of a special event. And as the memo says, if you really want to establish the Village Green as a public forum for free speech, then you should be crystal clear about that in the code. Alternatively, if you don't, then the code should be similarly written to read as you want it. And this matters because it kind of weighs in on how you handle the first item about the duration of events. Because if the village was not going to be a free speech forum, then the duration of the events really kind of comes into less play, I feel. But that's kind of the fundamental question in front of you. But I presented previously back in June about establishing a maximum duration of events. I put down 7 days. 3 has been the longest a special event has actually needed for actually a gathering of people on the Village Green and or other facilities, public property as it relates to, and that example is the Ghost Walk. It may have gone 4 days at one point before the village established this special event, but it's been a long time. But somewhere, 7 days or fewer would probably be more than adequate. And then the other potential change to the village's special event permit regulations that had been discussed by the board is that narrowing that universe of eligible applicants. We put together a draft ordinance that included certain, I guess, very specific persons that were eligible to apply for events. That includes Lake Bluff residents, property owners, businesses, event managers, and or local sponsoring agencies and local area sponsoring organizations. So that, again, that's smaller than everywhere. It's really Lake Bluff, Lake Forest centric. And I go back to when I first came to the village 17 years ago, the general sale direction for the village for special events is these special events make Lake Bluff who we are. We are a very grassroots community and we have lots of special events, and some of these have manifested themselves into iconic village events, Rib Fest, the parade, the bike race, all these major events that really define who we are. And so it's best to try to say yes where we could, and that's been the same direction over the years. So I don't think narrowing this universe impacts that to any great degree. And I think if there was a big enough event, like example, if Formula One wanted to come to Lake Bluff, don't think they would. But if they did, there'd probably be a long enough runway that we know about it and we can come and bring it to you all in advance of that. And I say that only to point out that could be a high-risk situation that somebody may or may not want to stand up for. And then jumping to the last one is the coming up with a limited village display or flag policy. I bring that up, again, I think if you're gonna, that works hand in glove with the definition of a special event. I think it's, as the village attorney pointed out, it's better to have a written policy for clarity's sake. I think some of these, assuming the village wants to continue to have holiday direct decorations on the Village Green, that some of these date limiting elements, it's better to have a written policy to give me the green light to have holiday decorations such as a menorah for longer than 3 or 5 or 7 days, right? That gives a green light path for that in a different place. If you did limit the duration of events using the special event permit to 7, then that prohibits that. But if you have a policy otherwise adopting clarity around the village allowing holiday decorations, then there's a way to get that done. And that's generally it. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. If not, you guys can just noodle on that and we can take this up at the 4th Monday in August.
Thank you, Drew. Any
I
comments?
just, I'm foggy on why this is, I know, I hear everything you just said. I
Yep.
just don't understand why there's any urgency on this right now, when we have just talked it into the ground and all decided that we wanted to give it much more thought. Why can't we just continue status quo?
You can continue status quo. That's always an option. I think it's better to be clearer. Consulting with the village attorney, that's been the direction thus far. I continue to bring it up for the idea that it's in the public dialogue, the community's engaged on it, and it seems to always be a good ripe time to do it. And I think we constantly get applications for special events, and it's a well-used set of regulations that I think when we put it in place almost 5 years ago, that I don't think it was perfected. And this is one of those examples where we've used it in areas that probably have overextended it. And so that's the long answer.
My way of thinking is that there isn't any urgency to it. What's important is that we continue to talk about it, right? That we don't lose track of this and just let it fester. Because special event permits are going to arise if they haven't arisen already. And I'm concerned about not having more clarity than we currently have. That being said, I don't feel like it's urgent. I feel like it's just important that we continue to have the discussion. So there's two issues that we keep. I think we're getting better about talking about the two issues, but they're still distinct issues. One is public speech on public property. Village, we decide what to say. And then there's private speech on public property and the extent to which the special event permit process has been and should continue to be used as a public forum speech process as well. I saw one of the proposed changes, the one that's highlighted in yellow, or and then another that's highlighted in green calls out that maybe special events ought to be events, not displays.
Right.
So that's one thing to think about. And much like the e-scooter discussion we just had, I'm not sure we're going to hash it out here, but and I'm not prepared to, but I just want to give people additional things to think about. One might be that the government speech is what we propose to do on the gazebo, which is separate from a special event. Special events can still happen, but what is a display is village speech. So we have special events, like this yellow language identifies, that are events. People are present. Posters go up to identify that it's going to happen, but the display itself is not the event. And then we have separately public speech controlled by us. We get to decide. You get to decide. We get to decide what the village is going to say. And I think if we'd had this discussion about the flagpoles, about what we would display on the gazebo in May, we would have been in a very different place. So what I'm thinking, and not deciding by any means, but I'm sitting here thinking, is maybe what the gazebo and the speech aspect of that is public speech. It was certainly perceived to be public speech or, government speech. And the event, special events, is more transitory. It is the ghost walk. It is information about the ghost walk. It is things where people will gather. So having given this no more thought than that, I continue to identify that it turned out the private speech that took place in June largely was terrific. And nobody wants to be perceived as pushing back on that. Most certainly I don't. But I think very, very quickly, we will see the downside to the use of the public forum. And so I want to be conscious of that and think about it holistically. Maybe we control the holiday decorations. It's public speech because we're deciding what will go there. That's public speech. Maybe we decide to put the pride flag up on the gazebo next year. We decide to next year. And that's public speech. And what is private speech are these events. So I say this all by way of saying that I know I am scratching up an old wound and nobody really wants to scratch up. But as I think about it, a 2-week display of something offensive, or even a 1-week display of something offensive, is not the way, not the way we want to go. So anyway, all this is by way of saying, I think this does need more thought. I think it does need more conversation. I don't think it's urgent that we get it right today or even fourth week in August, but it is necessary that we know who is speaking and for how long we will accept speech that we don't like. I don't like, you may like, I don't, right? And so I would like to go back to, now that we're more in holiday planning mode than anything else, really sorting through whether that entire gazebo, that entire 1 block square is really the First Amendment speech mecca of the North Shore, because as far as I can figure out, it would be unprecedented. Highland Park has a little triangle,
Yeah.
you know, tiny little triangle, and that's itself controversial apparently. So I say all this way of saying I have no answers, but I do think thinking about how much we want to do on the gazebo as government speech is worth thinking about. And I'll have to go back and listen to what I just said because off the top of my head.
You know
So-
what? Thank you for that. I mean, I think what is important is the thing, where I get caught is asking Kelly for that is, what are the guardrails? What are the conditions of First Amendment? Where does it
Yeah.
apply?
Mm-hmm.
Public and private speech, how does that play on our green right behind us?
Mm-hmm.
Differences between gazebo and flag mast, the green, the grass,
Mm-hmm.
standing or sitting or in the ground. Can you give us a primer on that?
Yes, and I'm going to break it down into the easiest way to probably understand it, which is with regard to the flags. So if the policy or an ordinance or an amendment to the current special events will include private individuals allowing to put up displays, then the best way to say that is come one, come all. You cannot prohibit, you couldn't prohibit the pride flag, you couldn't prohibit the American flag if someone wanted to post that, and you also unfortunately could not prohibit a swastika if that's what somebody wanted to post. If the policy was to open it up to the public to allow the flags to be displayed. If it is the government's, if it is Lake Bluff's policy that only Lake Bluff may use its property to post displays, then the government controls the speech. Then it is the government's speech, and the First Amendment is not going to apply to that. So the best way to think about it, once the gates are open, they're open to everybody, regardless of whether the general public finds it offensive or not,
Or any portion thereof, right?
or any portion
So-
thereof.
So that's the public speech.
Mhm.
We control that and we can decide what we want to say. And we may not all agree. It might be 4-3 or,
Right, so it's not uncommon for villages and municipalities in the region to post the pride flag or Black History Month. And they have those flags that they keep in storage and they post them up for various months. And those are the only flags that are allowed because it's the government's property and it's the government's speech. So whether anybody else finds it offensive or not, doesn't really matter. It's the government's right to display or not display.
Right, and we are not covered by the First Amendment.
Correct.
So, um, I say all this by way of saying that the special permit rules may be applied to events, special events rules, or I don't know,
The way I think about a special event, well, and let me just back up for a second too, because there's another nuance on the flags. So the proposal, or at least the way that this has been drafted for discussion, is to consider the special event in duration. If private displays were allowed, we can't really do that for a duration in a geographic limitation in the same way. So right now, the special event would limit to Lake Bluff residents or those having an affiliation with Lake Bluff. Couldn't do that in the same way with the flag.
I'm sorry, so maybe I'm not understanding
Yeah.
that.
So right now, the way that the special event definition is proposed is to limit the duration of the special event. If flags or displays were, not the duration, excuse me, the geographical limitation. So
Uh-huh.
if flags or displays were included as a special event, how could you really limit there's no geographic location of a display or a flag. So you can't really limit it in the same way you would a gathering.
So I'm not understanding that. You could say where it can go on public property, right?
Correct, but you cannot state that only those residents of Lake Bluff may display those flags. That would be more difficult to do.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So we could not say a permit will only be granted to people in this geographic area
Right, and the reason for the
if it were displays included.
because you have to think about the special event of a gathering differently, and you think about it more as a resource issue. The reason why local governments request special event permits is so that your police department knows approximately how
Yep.
many people will be gathering,
Yeah.
how many staff members need to be around, if streets need to be closed. So there's a good correlation for a reason to get a special event permit for a gathering. You can't really make that same argument for a flag or a display. Doesn't really require resources.
No.
Thank you.
welcome.
So it seems to me like the main thing that is happening right now is let it sleep. Let us ponder that a little bit more.
It's a lot to think about.
And there's a lot.
There is.
Of, the public events. So what I'm getting is we're going to pass on that. We are going to think more about it.
If it's not on the next agenda item, I will tell you it's going to be part of my trustees report. I think we have to keep, this is not an easy question. This is why these kind of issues go to the Supreme Court. People get it wrong all the time, right? And well, we're not going to be here again in May
I think
next
this is
year.
an item that's not going to die, and I'm very clear about that. What I see is I am trying to establish I'm looking at everybody's face. I think people are very present to what you're saying, no doubt about it. But we're a little bit I think we need to think more about it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I would really be in favor of, okay, let's continue thinking about it. And tonight, we probably do not have a direction for Drew.
No, we don't. We don't.
Yeah.
Okay?
But do you
That's
need
where I-
something from us?
Well, I don't need anything. It'd be great to get direction, but clearly time has run out tonight and I presume you're going to want to take some public comment. If somebody
Yes,
has
I
a
do
comment.
actually.
But
Mhm.
I go back to mentioning a work plan for this previously, and maybe let's spend a Saturday morning talking about it.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
I
sure-
think that's right. I think that's right.
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll get some dates out there.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. And I will accept public comments at this point. Peter, please state your name and your address.
Just two brief comments. Peter White, East Sheridan Place. As you consider your display policy in the ensuing months, I'd ask you to consider the use of the gazebo or frankly, the non-use of the gazebo. It's a beautiful structure. A day or two for a special event like Rib Fest makes sense, goes up, comes down. But for significant durations, I don't think it adds to the aesthetic value of the community, number one. And number two, whether it's the Boy Scouts, I would object if the Boy Scouts decorated the village green the way it was decorated in the month of June, I guess. I would ask that we consider having a more aesthetic appeal, maybe just the big trees, but not every vertical structure, including the chairs, weaving in and out. Whatever group does that, I think it detracts from the bucolic nature of Lake Bluff. So think about where those ribbons should go and how our community is best represented, rather than maybe a bunch of second graders that escaped art class with their crayons. All right,
Thank you, Peter. Any more comments in the room? We might actually finish at 7. So on this, any comments online?
If anybody wants to raise a hand and be recognized, that may be participating in this committee, the whole meeting via Zoom, now is a great time to raise your hand. No one is raising their hand.
All right. And if there are no more comments, I would like a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you, and we are adjourned.